Hello, welcome to my garden on this very hot day because it's going to get ridiculous. And today we're going to do a tutorial for my mallard duck. Now what we're going to do is make it slightly different from this one. This one's on the written pattern, but I'm going to do the option of this one, which has got the yellow beak and feet to match, because while mallard ducks have orange feet, they do look a little bit silly with the blue and with the yellow and the orange contrasting. And we're going to leave off this purple here because not everybody has like a little end of purple yarn that they want to use up, and this makes the tutorial for the easier version of the duck. This shouldn't take too long to knit, but we'll see how we go in putting the tutorial together. So what we're going to need is we're going to need some double knit yarn in brown. I'm just using Flight Naturals because I have some left over from a baby blanket. Emerald green, golden yellow, and some white. All of my yarn is merino, but that's accidental. You can use acrylic, you can use whatever. Then we're going to need some stuffing, but clearly we don't need a lot. 2 safety eyes and some straight knitting needles, because this is knit flat. I don't think you're going to need a stitch marker. I don't think you're going to need much else, and a darning needle. That's about it. So without further ado, we'll get onto it. Right, so we're using 3.5mm needles here, but this is just for the DK weight yarn, which is half a size down from what you would normally use. And we're going to start by casting on 10 stitches. It doesn't matter what kind of cast on you use, but I would say leave quite a reasonable tail, because we'll use that for stitching up at the end. I'm not particularly good at casting on camera or in general. I mean, there's two things that everybody, well, not everybody, but there's two things that I don't look forward to in a project, and that's casting on and casting off, because it feels like that's where you have to do a lot of counting, so you can't just do some mindless knitting. So there we go. We've got 10 stitches, hopefully. I always count mine in 5s. So we've got 10 stitches on our needles, and now row 1, we're just going to knit all of these stitches. I don't really have much intention to just keep sitting here and knitting, because there are going to be some rows that are repetitive. So we'll put those in, you know, a nice sped up format, or I just won't cover it at all in the tutorial. We shall see. Okay, so there we go. Row 1. So row 2 is a purl, and what we're doing when I row 2 is we're going to be increasing 9 stitches. So to do that, we're just going to knit 1, and then we're going to pick up this bridge down here, or purl 1, sorry, and then we're going to purl it. So purl 1, purl the bridge, purl 1, purl the bridge down here, purl 1, purl the bridge. Now I'm not sure if I mentioned, but we start at the bottom of the duck. I've been doing a lot of crochet recently because I'm a crocheter now. I crochet, and they tend to start from the top of the head. I think it's just been the triceratops that I've made from Complicated Knots that has started at not the head that I've made so far anyway. So it's been an interesting journey comparing how I do amigurumi on knitting needles and how it works on crochet. Oh, I missed that one completely. Anybody would think that while staring in the camera rather than at the stitches and talking mindlessly, this is the hardest one, is picking up that bridge from that last stitch. It just, I find that one a struggle. Okay, so there's that there. So we have now got 19 stitches on our needles. Now the next 2 rows, we're going to knit row 3, and on row 4, we're going to do the same sort of picking up technique, but I will rejoin you on row 4. So here I've knit row 4, and we're up to, well no, we've knit row 3. Now we're up to row 4. Row 4, what we're going to be doing is very similar to row 2, except this time instead of purling 1, we're going to purl 2, and then we're going to pick up a stitch. Then we're going to purl 2. Then we're going to pick up a stitch. Purl 2. 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 At this point you'll be sick of me saying purl 2, pick up a stitch, but unfortunately that's the instruction. Purl 2, pick up a stitch. Purl 2, pick up a stitch. Now you may notice we've got 3 stitches left at this point, so we're going to purl 2. We're going to pick up this last bridge, purl that bridge. Oh, have I split the yarn? No, I haven't. And then we're going to just purl that last singular stitch. So we should have increased about 9 stitches there, and we should be up to 28 stitches. So what have we got? We've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 28 stitches. So the next couple of rows are just straight knit and purl before we start increasing for the tail. So if we have a look at our mallard here, what we've got is that we come out at the side here. So we've increased this bit, we're going to knit some rows, then we're going to come out for the tail, then we're going to decrease from the tail and go up through the body. Right, so I've just moved my setup a little bit because, as I said, it's being a very hot day. So rows 5 and 6 are just a straight knit row and a purl row. So I'll do those and come back to you here, and we'll join up again at row 7, which is when we start to increase for our tail. All right, so I've just done rows 5 and 6 off camera, and now what we're going to do here is we're going to start increasing for the tail. So we're going to knit 2, then we're going to pick up the bridge in between stitches 2 and 3 to make 1, knit 2, and we're going to make another one, then we're going to knit all the way to the other side of the row. When we get to the last 4, we're going to make 1, knit 2, make 1, knit 2. So we'll see how that goes. So we knit 2, then we pick up this bridge. I'm never very good at knitting the bridges, I tell you, it's just a life struggle. I need sharper needles or something. So there we've made 3 stitches. We're going to knit 2. I know sometimes I do this really efficiently and I feel like I am a legend, and then there are other times where I just do it badly. So there we go, we've had 4 stitches and now we've made 2 more. So knit 2, make 1, knit 2, make 1. Then we just knit all the way across to the other side of the row. And we get that soothing ASMR sound of metal needles on merino yarn. Now I tend to alternate between metal needles and wooden needles depending on how my hands are feeling, or the ergonomic needles. But what I find about the metal needles is while they get a little bit bent when people stand on them or sit on them, they don't tend to break, as I had several needle breakages when I was on holiday recently, and it was not good. And also these ones don't taste good for dogs who feel like chewing my knitting. So we've got 4 stitches left here. We're going to pick up this bridge, knit it to make 1, then we're going to knit 2, we're going to pick up this bridge again, knit it and make 2. Now the next 3 rows are just a purl, knit, purl, and then we're coming back to do knit 2, make 1, knit 2, make 1 for the following row. So row 8 is purl, row 9 is knit, row 10 is purl, and row 11 we're doing exactly the same as we've just done here on row 7. And then row 12, 13 and 14 are all just knits and purls. So I think I'm just going to do that and then come back onto this tutorial. All right, so we're now going to do the tail. Now the tail itself looks quite cute when it's done. There's a little bit of a row there. There's going to be some cutting of some yarn and some rejoining of some yarn before we do the rest of the body. So it gets a little bit confusing, but it's only a 2-row process, to be honest. The first row, not too bad. So we're going to, this is row number 15. We're going to knit 1 and we're going to knit 2 together. If I can knit 2 together today. There we go, we've knit 2 together. Now we're going to knit 2 together again. So we have taken those extra stitches away. Now we're going to knit over to the last 5 stitches on this row. Not that really needed to get to the last 5. What we want is the last 3, but I was reading the wrong line. So we've got 3 stitches left, and now we're going to ignore our working yarn and pick up this tail of yarn, well, this scrap of yarn we've just picked up, and we are going to purl these 3 together using our scrap of yarn, and then we're just going to pull the tail through the loop. It works to pull both tails through at this point. So what we do have here on our knitting is we've got 1/2 of the tail poking out that side, 1/2 of the tail poking out that side, and just some brown yarn in the middle. What we're going to do now is we are going to knit this row, purl the next one, knit the next one, and then we are going to come in with our neck yarn over here. So I will rejoin you at that point. Now we're over at the last 5 stitches. What we're going to do is, rather than just knitting 2 together, because I'd like them to lean the other direction, we're going to knit 2 together, but we're going to go through the back loops, which is very much like doing an SSK, only I think way faster. So we're going to knit 2 together through the back loops, and then we're going to knit 1. And that takes us to row number 16. So what we're going to do on row number 16 is we are going to take a look at these first 3. We are going to purl these 3 together, which again, so much harder to do on camera. We're going to purl these 3 together. We're going to take our yarn and we're going to cut the yarn with a bit of a tail, and we're going to pull it through the loop. There we have our first side of our ducktail. Now at this point, I like to take a small length of yarn and cut it off when we get to the other side of the row, because we're going to do the same thing again, and we're just going to reattach yarn so that we can move across. So we're just going to purl across until we get to the last 5. Not that really needed to get to the last 5. What we want is the last 3, but I was reading the wrong line. So we've got 3 stitches left, and now we're going to ignore our working yarn and pick up this tail of yarn, well, this scrap of yarn we've just picked up, and we are going to purl these 3 together using our scrap of yarn, and then we're just going to pull the tail through the loop. It works to pull both tails through at this point. So what we do have here on our knitting is we've got 1/2 of the tail poking out that side, 1/2 of the tail poking out that side, and just some brown yarn in the middle. What we're going to do now is we are going to knit this row, purl the next one, knit the next one, and then we are going to come in with our neck yarn over here. So I will rejoin you at that point. Alright, so all we're going to do at this point, now that we've finished these rows, is we're going to cut off this brown yarn. I like to leave far more of a tail than I think I'm going to need, because we use this for sewing up later, and at the end of the day we can just tuck it in the inside. It's not the end of the world. And we're going to take our white yarn, and really simply we're going to purl across this row in white, and I'll catch up with you then. Right, so we've knitted one, well, purled one row in white. Now what we're going to do is we are going to knit 2 and then knit 2 together over the course of the entire row. So we knit 2, knit 2 together, knit 2, knit 2 together, knit 2, knit 2 together. Now, so every time I use this yarn in particular, I think, oh, I really love this yarn. This here is an undyed merino from Skeins, and it is so soft. I used it to make a hat recently, and it's just divine. We're going to knit 2 together at this point. And now we've got 2 stitches left, so we're going to knit those just regularly. And now that's the end of our white yarn, which is disappointing because I really like knitting with that white yarn. A tail much longer than we need. And now it's time for our emerald green. Now with the emerald green, we are going to be first purling the row, and then we're going to be doing 12 more rows of stockinette stitch. So I'll film a few of them, and I will then come back to you after I've done 13 rows total of green. Right, so those 11 green rows have been finished. Now we're going to start decreasing for the top of his head. So we're going to start now with a knit 1 and knit 2 together. Now with this here, we're going to just knit 1, knit 2 together over the entire row. Now the row itself is going to end without the right number of stitches to do this evenly across the whole row, but that's fine. We're going to go across until we get, I've forgotten how to talk and knit at once. So knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, and then we're just going to knit the last 2 stitches as normal. We're now going to purl the next row, and this is our last row on the body, and we are going to knit 2 together across the entire row. So let's knit 2 together, knit 2 together, knit 2 together, knit 2 together. I really like this colour of the emerald green. I picked up this one from Miss Mallard in Greytown. It is such a nice craft fabric yarn shop. Oh, I've split the yarn there, being too distracted. I do need to go and get some more sock knitting needles from her, because my Christmas sock needle issues, I haven't got around to replacing them. So there we go, we've got 7 stitches left. We are going to cut this yarn off. We're going to remember that we left our needles just out of reach, and at this point we need a darning needle. Come here, pink darning needle. And we're going to just slip all the remaining stitches onto our darning needle. And pull it tight, and that's the body done. The next part we're going to work on is the wings. Now the wings, they start at the top here and they finish at this point down here. They start a bit strangely in this white. You'll see it's just a small section, but it is curved. So we're going to start here in just a moment. So for the top of the wings, we're going to start by casting on 3 And then row 1 is really simple. We are just knitting these 3 stitches. It doesn't get easier than this. Look at that. Nice short row. And I just slide that slip knot across. Right, so there's our row 1. Row 2 is we're going to purl 1, and then we're going to pick up this bridge to make 1. We're going to purl another one, and we're going to pick up this bridge to make another one. And this one is always a trial for me. Ugh. Make sure I don't get that split in there. Let's pretend that we didn't see it. There we go. So now we have got, if I pull that yarn tightly, we have now got 5 stitches on our needles. At this point we are going to now knit 1, make 1 by knitting this. Come here, come on, you know you want to be knitted. Knit 1, make 1. We're going to knit 3. And then we're going to pick up this bridge. And we're going to make 1 more. And we're going to knit 1 more. So we're now up to 7 stitches. We're now going to turn our work, and we are going to purl 1. You'll never guess what the next instruction is. That's correct. We are now going to pick up this bridge, and we're going to make another one. We are going to purl 5, which takes us across to the last stitch on our needle. We're going to pick up the annoying bridge. We're going to purl that to make another one, and purl the last one. Now that gives us 9 stitches on our needles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this yarn here, and I'm going to cut it off with a tail, and I'm going to repeat this so that we end up with 2 of these flappy bits on 1 needle, and I will see you when that's done. Right, so there we've got our 2 little flappy wings, and I've got all kinds of birds flying around me at the moment. I think those are the pied stilts making a lot of noise. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to remove our white yarn here, and we have what looks like a big giant mess. And what we're going to do now is we are going to take our brown mallard yarn, and we are going to knit across all of these stitches, and that's going to basically turn it into 1 unit. Yeah, that's a way of describing it. Yeah. So we're just going to knit across these first 9. Now some of the ones on the edge are going to be a little loose to start with because they've got some yarn tails that aren't hooked into place yet, but don't worry about it. It'll sort itself out in the wash. Just make sure your yarn tails are long enough and that this stitch across here is fairly tight. Oh, a little too tight, 180. There we go. Right. So this will give us 18 stitches on this row here. Right. Okay, so all of our stitches here, we've got a flappy bit here which is going to fold in half to create this white wing tip here. We're going to leave the purple stitches off of this particular pattern, and the rest of this wing is going to be in the brown. So what we're going to do next is we are literally just going to purl the next row, knit the next row, purl the next row, and then I will come back and we will start shaping the bottom of the wings together. Right, so this brings us up to row 10 of the wing, and what we're going to do now is we are going to purl 1, and then we are going to purl 2 together. We're going to purl 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to purl 2 together through the back loops, which is kind of a bit annoying. So rather than doing this, we're going to come in from the other side, which clearly I can't seem to do around the camera. Erg. No, I'm not managing it all. There we go. Right. Okay. So we're going to purl 2 together through the back loops here. That's now going to mean that we are going to purl 2 together normally. Then we are going to purl 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We are now going to purl 2 together through the back loops again, and I'm just going to relax and hope that it happens. There we go. Erg. That was appalling, Juanita. Appalling. Right, let's try that again. Let's pick them up. I'll say this, sometimes I think it's easier on acrylic yarn. So we've purled 3 together through the back loops, and we've purled 1. To be fair, you can just purl 2 together. You don't need to purl 2 together through the back loops for this, but what this does do is it means that what we've got is our stitches are leaning in on the sides of the wing, which makes it a little bit neater at the end. But it is a giant pain in the butt to do at the time. So row 11, we're going to knit 1. Now we're going to knit 2 together through the back loops. That's going to make those stitches lean in. Then we're going to knit 2, and we're going to knit 2 together the normal way. Even though, I tell you, working around a camera does not make purling or knitting 2 together very easy. Then we're going to knit 2 together through the back loops. Then we're going to knit 2. We're going to knit 2 together the normal way, and we're going to knit 1. This now brings us to row 12, which is going to seem awfully familiar because we're going to start with a purl 1, a purl 2 together, a purl 2 together through the back loops because I'm clearly a masochist trying to film this. It'd be so much better just to, I've dropped all my stitches, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. Mild panic, I'll just put them all back on over there. There, we'll just go back and I will purl those 2 stitches together. You'd think I'd edit that out, but I'm not going to because we all know this happens all the time when we're knitting. It's just a level of panic that we do. We just don't normally catch it all on film. So we're going to now purl those 2 together through the back loops and regret all of our life decisions in deciding to make them lean. We're going to purl these 2 together the normal way and just relax because we enjoy purling things together the normal way. And then we're going to realise that this brings us to some purling through the back loops where we regret all of our life decisions and we purl them together, and then we're there. So we can see we've got quite a bit of fold going on, but what we do have is some leaning stitches in the correct direction, which looks pretty good. We're now going to knit this entire row, which is going to be relaxing because we enjoy doing this because there's none of this through the back loops nonsense. However, you know what's happening on this next row. You can sense it just as well as I can. We're all going to prepare for it. So on this row here, this takes us to row 14. We are going to purl 1. We're going to purl 2 together. We're going to purl 2 together through the back loops because at the end of the day, it will look better, even if it's annoying at this point. Right, there we go. We've purled 2 together through the back loops, and now we're going to purl 1. This brings us to row 15, which is our last row, And here what we're going to do is we are going to just knit 2 together through the back loops, which is honestly the most relaxing thing in the world to do after doing all these purl 2 togethers through the back loops. We're going to knit through 2 together the regular way, and then we're done. So we're going to take our yarn tail, we're going to cut it longer than we think it needs to be. We're going to pick up our darning needle and we are going to just slide it through those 2 remaining stitches and pull it tight. Now if we fold this in half, what we have is this cute little wing. It's got a slight little edge up, it's got nice shaping on each side. Yeah, now you just need to repeat this and do this again. Cool. And the next thing we will do is the feet. Now, feet are only 5 rows long, which normally would make us relax. However, you've seen the rest of this pattern. It's not hard, it's just fiddly because this is a small mallard. So row 1, we are just knitting these 3 stitches. And now I'll just tighten up my slip stitch from the cast on. Again, it doesn't matter which form of cast on you use. I just use a cable cast on because that's what my mother taught me. Right, now we're going to purl row 2. Everything's fine. We're having a grand time. Everything's great. Look at that. It's the start of a foot. Right, so this one. What we're going to do now is row 3. We are going to knit 1. We're going to pick up the bridge, knit the bridge. See, after all these purl 2 togethers, knitting the bridge doesn't feel so bad. We're going to knit 1, we're going to pick up the bridge, we're going to knit the bridge, and we're going to knit 1. So we now have 5 stitches on our needles. For row 4, we are going to purl all these 5 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And our last row, this is our picot bind off. If you've done a picot before, then you'll know how to do this, but otherwise it's not too bad, but it's a little bit strange. So we're going to start by casting on 2. See, I find the cable cast on to be the easiest, but other people don't always agree. So we've cast on 2 extra stitches. We're now going to cast off 4. So that's casting off these 2 that we've just added. Then we're casting off this first stitch by knitting our second stitch. So that is our cast off 4. We're just going to leave this one here for a moment. We're going to come here and we're going to cast on 2 stitches, which can be a little tricky because we don't want to lose the stitch on the other side. So we've cast on 2 stitches here. We're now going to continue our cast off by casting off. So we knit that 1, cast off 1, cast off 2. That takes off those 2 extra ones that we've just done. Cast off that one, and then cast off there. All right, so I think that's been a cast off 4 and then a cast off 5 even. Now we're going to cast on 2, so that's 1, 2. Now we're just going to knit this. We're going to cast off 1. We're going to cast off 2. We're going to cast off 3. Yes, it's just cast off 4 all the time. And then we're going to cut off this yarn here with a much longer tail than we think we're going to need. And we're going to thread it through this loop and pull it tight. And what we have here is our little foot. And yes, it looks a little bit weird because what we're going to do is we're going to take this yarn tail and tuck it in behind. And then now we've got our little foots. Isn't he cute? Now we're going to need 2 of these. Now, our final piece is the easiest piece to knit, and you'll be very relieved to hear that. So here we've got 10 stitches for the beak, and this is just another 5-row knitting pattern. So nice and simple. Row 1, we just knit. Row 2 is just purl. Row 3 is just knit, and row 4 is just purl. So I will do those rows and come back to you with 4 rows of stockinette stitch done on this beak. All right, if it'll focus. Right, so there's our 4 rows there of stockinette stitch, and this last one here we are just going to knit 1. We're going to knit 2 together, and we're doing it through the front loops, and we're struggling with it even so. So we just knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, and then we end on a knit 1. And that's all it is to the beak, to be honest. It's nice and simple. We can't complain with simple, which means we just need to cut this yarn, thread our needle, this is why I like using double pointed needles. And now we're just going to slide all of our remaining stitches onto our darning needle, and pull it tight. And there's our little beak. All right, so yeah. So that's all the pieces knitted for our mallard. So what's going to be left is we're going to take them all and we're going to sew them up together. So what you should have is 1 body, 1 beak, 2 wings and 2 feet, and then we're going to reassemble with our 2 safety eyes, our stuffing, darning needle, pair of scissors, and we're going to be good to go and put this little puppy together. Quack, quack. All right, so here we've got all of our bits and pieces, and we're going to start with the body because I find the bit that is worth putting in first is the head and the eyes. So I've got the eyes here in my hand, which I don't want to drop, and I'm going to a relatively sharp needle. We're going to pick up this green yarn tail, and we are going to attempt to thread that on camera like we know what we're doing. Okay, you can do this in a mattress stitch, or you can do what I do, which is basically just whip stitch along the edge. Yeah, so I line up the white stripe, which I find is very helpful. Pull that top stitch tight, then just whip stitch, or you can mattress stitch if you so desire. As I've got stuffing blowing away in the breeze. You know, you'd think I would learn not to do these outside, but I know that summer is lovely and I should get my vitamin D, and I'm going to be spending most of the year indoors, so I should enjoy it while it lasts. Even if I do tend to choose stupid days to be outdoors. And who needs to be filming a video outside when they could be filming a video inside and doing something else outside on a beautiful day? But instead, this is what I've decided to do. And that is quite bright sunlight. All right, so we get to the bottom of this green section, and I do like to secure this bottom bit relatively well, but then we don't need the green anymore. So we're just going to tuck the green on the inside. Now, if we take this and fold it so that his seam is at the back, that will give us his face, just like this. So we want to line up these eyes as we've got here, sort of around about here-ish. Now all I'm going to do to start with is I'm just going to pop them through roughly, just like that. and check that they're lined up. It's not really lined up, is it? Let's try that spot there. Honestly, putting the eyes in, technically a really easy task. Are they straight or were they straighter before? It's hard to know. Either way, we're going to pick up our beak, which is floating around here, sort of, and just check there's enough room for a beak there. Might want to be, no, that's probably about right. So, now's the time to pop the backs on these eyes. So that's popped the backs on and popped the head back the right way around. And I'm going to take some stuffing and I'm going to throw that in there. Now, one thing that you are going to have to do with the stuffing when you stuff the head is, look at his little Google eyes, is I find just picking up and adjusting those backs a little, because unless you want to melt the backs, which I find relatively dangerous because I feel like I'll set fire to things, the backs need to be pointed into the stuffing a little bit more. So that'll be there for the moment. Now we're going to go to the bottom of our duck. And this bit can be done with the blunt needle, or it can be done with the sharp needle, to be honest. Oh, I am enjoying the pleasant breeze. There goes my stuffing again. But my apologies for the wind noise. Because once you commit to filming outside, you don't want to go inside. Alright, so what we're going to do at this point is we're just going to have a look at this bottom row. And we'll see that there's this little row of almost holes. And you can go along and thread through them. And then we're just going to pull it tight and come back and seam up over here. So we've pulled that tight along the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to stitch from here up to the points where the tail joins, just in one great big row. And I'll see you back on camera because leaning around the camera to do this is proving challenging. So now that we've stitched up the back there, we're now going to stuff the rest of our duck here and seam the back of the duck closed with one of these brown yarn tails. I need to go play fetch my stuffing that's just blown away in the breeze. Tuck the green ones in. What one I'll use in just a moment, and which one of these brown ones will I use? Probably that one, I think. So these can all be tucked in. Right, green can go. Now we can see the start of our duck taking shape. Just a little bit more stuffing. Shove that in there. It's at this point you get to decide, you know, how chonky is your chonky boy. Now this is not the only duck pattern I have available. It's one of 4. So we're just going to seam from here to here and use some white stitches here to close that bit there. And I'll do that and then come back to you. Right, and that's our little duck so far. There isn't any more stuffing required, so that's the easy part there. I think what we'll do next is we'll put on his little feet, and then we'll do the wings, and then we'll do the beak. But to be honest, any of these can happen at any point once you've got his wee body. So we'll start by looking at his feet. We made yellow ones this time, but my original pattern has orange ones because mallard ducks have orange feet. Right, so we're going to get the little feet. These are probably the most tricky of all the bits to do, for no real reason actually. It's just, I think, the way that I like doing them. We're going to start by picking up this last bit, which was the stitching off of our last stitch. So we're going to take this little nubbin and just fold it under. And I find that if you fold it under with just a little stitch like that, it just makes the toes sit a little bit better. And then all I do is just run a little stitch across the middle toe. This is all on the back, and pull it in a little bit, and then I just run it to the other side of this toe here for really no reason, because I don't think that makes a huge difference to the shape. It's mainly pulling this guy in that's the best idea. And then we're just going to hold it on our duck. We're going to let him sit down. We're going to work out where we want his foot to be. We have one foot there. You can just pin them on, which is probably a good idea, only I don't feel like it. I always find that when I pin things on, I stab myself a little too often, and I don't feel like it today. So we're just going to stitch this on here. I find a straight stitch down and then angle your way back up through his little foot. Now when we get to this tail, all we're going to do with the tail is sort of roll it around your finger and just pop it under his foot. It's going to give him just a little bit of a poofy outness on his foot, which is kind of cute. And then we're just going to carry on stitching his wee foots on there. Right. We're coming around. I've gone back to my sharp needle for this because I find the sharp needle works well here. I've just missed the foot and picked up the stuffing. So we'll come back through the foot. Come back up there. Oh, I'm only just holding on to that yarn. Playing fast and loose, I tell you. I'm a wild man. Right, and now all that we need to do is to go across the top here and make sure that we get that yarn tail caught inside. So we'll just go through there, go through there, we'll come out through there. Oh, I am playing fast and loose with the amount of yarn required and left. Right, so we've got a tiny little yarn tail here, and now what we're going to do is just sort of secure it and lose it through the middle. You can do one of those cool little knots, and I probably would, but to be honest, I don't have a lot of yarn tail left. And now I'll just trim that off. If you have a needle felting tool, you can go dun, 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 and that'll hold that yarn tail in there. Right, I will now put on this other foot and see you shortly. So here we have his little feet done, and they're all stitched on. So we'll move on to our wings. Oh, I need to lose my beak there. Now the wing folds in half. So the first thing we'll do is we'll take a look at these white yarn tails. We'll pick one from the edge. We'll thread this yarn tail onto our needle, and we'll tuck the others. Oh, actually, we might leave that one out. You'll see why in a minute. We'll tuck the others on the inside. Now, if we now whip through this point here, where the two colours meet, and secure that with a little extra stitch. Right there, and now we're just going to seam up across the top. Again, I really like this white yarn, it's so unbelievably soft. Now I'm just trying to pick up the outside of each of these stitches, but it doesn't really make a big difference overall. You don't need to do this, I'm just doing it because I have lost track of exactly how many of these ducks I've made so far. There are currently 4 different duck patterns that I've got ready to release when I release this video tutorial for the mallard, because I figure the mallard's probably going to be the most popular. My reasoning for that is that the Others involve a pair of paradise shell ducks, which are, I'm from New Zealand, so it's a New Zealand bird. I have them on my pond. And what's cool about them is that the paradise shell duck, the female, is a more interesting colour than the male. And that always makes me feel good. So we'll pop those yarn tails just inside the wing there to act like a little bit of stuffing. And we'll take this little yarn tail, we'll pop him inside as well. And now we're just going to take this piece here, thread it up. I mean, it should be fairly obvious, so I probably don't need to walk you through this, but we're just going to take our wing and just carefully whip stitch, mattress stitch, whatever floats your boat. I mean, I've gone to the effort of using mattress stitches in the past, but honestly, I don't really think it matters. Well, it doesn't matter to me. If I was going to be selling these mallards, I'd probably go with a mattress stitch, just to be cute and adorable. But you see, that whip stitch is still very neat. And now we'll just lose that yarn tail in the centre, just to secure that. But I do want to leave it out around about, where's a good point to come through? Maybe up through here. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to take our mallard body, throw our wing not on this side because see how it's coming down. We want the wing to be coming up at the bottom. I mean, I probably could have just flipped it over, let's be honest, but we want it, is the wing coming up at the back? So we're just going to stitch on with the brown, stitch on with the white, and stitch on with the brown just around the back. So it'll look like this guy here. I'll do that and I will come back. There we go, we've got his wings both sewn on. That just leaves his little beak. So if we pick up his little beak here in our long yarn tail, this is from the cast off edge where we threaded all the stitches on at the tip of his bill. So what we're going to do to start with is we're just going to line up the sides, pull that top bit flat, and then this bit really doesn't matter because we are going to slide the seam to the inside, or the underneath. So there we've got, it's currently on the top. Now we're just going to take it and squish it the other way. So we should have a rounded bit on the top, a little opening here, a bonus yarn tail. So just as we did before, we're just going to wrap this around our finger. And then I often like using the back end of a crochet hook for this bit, but I don't have one currently on me. But we're just going to shove it in the hole. So there's our beak stuffed with some yellow yarn tail, just like that. Now we're just going to come along to his face. Now we're going to start underneath. If I pop him there and just, yeah, you just feel a little bit mean when you suddenly stab him in the face with a pointy needle, but if you leave the beak till last, then you can't scream. Right, so at this point we've gone along the bottom and I'm just going to give it a bit of a squeeze upwards so that we can pull the beak out this way. It's more of a bill, isn't it, with an aquatic waterfowl. Just to secure that there with a couple of stitches on the side. Oh, hooked around his foot. And now we're going to just stitch up here. Now this bill is purely aesthetic. It doesn't have any, I was going to say function. The function is making it look like a duck, but like there's no real stuffing to it. You're just creating this personality. I know that a lot of patterns these days say attach between row 7 and row 8. But I grew up at a time where your patterns would say things like sew on arm, sew on leg. And it's really hard to get away from that. Yeah. All right. Okay. So that couple of those sticks them on there. Then we will pull our yarn tail through the centre of our bill. Take our tiny scissors, give it a chop, give it a bit of a squeeze, that'll disappear back inside. Now, he's done. He's done. Now, the only difference between this guy and this guy is that this guy, I've put in a couple more stitches and pulled in his face, just to give him a little bit more shaping. But I don't know if this guy needs him. We'll give him a little eye shuffle. We could pull his eyes in a little, but there he is. There's our little wee mallard. There's his little wee tail. There's his cute little face. Yes. So you now have a fully completed knitted mallard of your own. Go forth and make a whole squadron of them.